Listen up. This is one of those stories that sneaks up quiet, then hits you square in the heart. A fragile, hard-won flicker of belonging born in the dead of a killer western winter. Out on the lonely North Ridge, where snow drifts taller than a man on horseback, and every stranger carries a shadow you can't quite read. That's the rugged crossroads where destiny don't knock politely. It just shows up with 3 small children and a widow who's got nothing left to lose. It all sparked from something so ordinary it hurts. A single handwritten notice nailed to a post outside a trading post. Wanted. Cook for winter. 4 plain words. But they were powerful enough to drag 4 lost souls across frozen ruts and straight into the guarded, solitary life of a rancher who thought he'd never need anyone again. If stories about second chances under a merciless sky move you, give this a like and let me know down below. Where in the world are you watching from right now? Thaddeus Flint had nailed up a sign looking for a winter ranch cook, and when a lone widow rolled in with 3 kids in tow, it turned his whole world upside down. The notice hung lopsided on the ice-crusted post outside Mason Creek's trading post. Its edges were brittle with frost, ink smeared from the overnight snow. Wanted. Cook for the winter season. Room, board, fair pay. Thaddeus Flint, North Ridge Ranch. He hadn't meant to stir pity in town. Folks eyed him like he was carrying some unspoken grief no one dared name. Truth was simpler. He was short-handed, the ranch was hurting, and a long winter begged for another soul under the roof. That morning the cold had teeth. It pressed slow and heavy against the hills. Snow drifted across the valley like ghost dunes under a lead sky. The air tasted sharp, iron mixed with pine resin. Thaddeus stepped out of the barn, gloves stiff as boards, breath curling white. The land felt too big, too quiet this year. He tugged Sophrona's old scarf tighter around his neck, the one she'd knitted years back, threads thin but stubborn, and headed for the porch. The planks groaned under his boots, same tired creak they'd made for too many lonely seasons. Coffee waited inside, but he stopped at the top step. A wagon crawled down the ridge trail, wheels grinding frozen ruts, mules plowing through drifts that ate every sound. A woman gripped the reins, black shawl marking her a widow. 3 small shapes huddled behind her, kids buried under patched blankets more threadbare hope than fabric. Thaddeus's breath snagged. He'd asked for a cook, not a whole family pulling up to his gate. The wagon stopped near the porch. She didn't speak right away, just studied him the way a hard winter studies a man who's been alone too long. Calm, weighing, almost kind. Then she climbed down, boots punching deep into the snow. Close up she looked young, 30 or so, but the frontier had already signed its name across her face. Cheeks raw from wind, eyes holding steady fires, shoulders squared against burdens she never complained about. Snowflakes melted on her lashes. She cleared her throat. "Sir, name's Almira Voss." Her voice came soft but solid, the kind forged by saying tough things when your heart wasn't ready. "I saw your sign for a cook." Thaddeus opened his mouth. Words stuck. The children clambered down. 2 boys, 1 girl, wrapped so thick they resembled walking bedrolls. The littlest one clutched a burlap sack. Something inside clinked. Maybe cookpots, maybe treasures. The oldest boy stood tall beside his mother, chin up, daring the world to knock him down. Thaddeus swallowed, forced his voice level. "I did post it, but I wasn't figuring on a family," Almira finished for him, unflinching. He gave a short nod. She swallowed once, fingers tightening on her shawl. "My husband's been gone 6 months. We stayed with his kin as long as they'd have us, but winter don't favor everybody the same. They told us to move along." She lifted her chin, a small, fierce thing. "I work hard. I ain't asking for handouts." We'll bed down in the barn if we have to, but my kids need heat. If you'll take us, I can cook, sew, wash, run that kitchen sunup to sundown." The wind sliced between them then, sharp enough to cut decisions. Thaddeus looked at the children. The smallest girl, Zephyr, shivered, hands buried in her sleeves. Laramie, the oldest, watched him like a hawk ready to strike if he gave the wrong answer. Burl stood quiet, eyes wide. Then Thaddeus met Almira's gaze again. Something warm flickered under his ribs, faint but real. Winter itself seemed to lean back a fraction. He stepped off the porch. "You'll stay in the house," he said, voice dropping low. "All of you. Barn ain't fit for young ones." Almira's breath caught, not from the cold. She nodded quick, almost afraid to believe it. Thaddeus jerked his head toward the door. "Come inside. Warm up first. We'll sort the rest after." They filed in, boots leaving dark melt spots on the boards. Thaddeus shut the door firm behind them. The house drew in a long breath, like it hadn't tasted company in years. Almira stood by the hearth while Thaddeus fed the fire higher. The flames jumped, throwing light across her face. The kids clustered close, wary, taking in the bare room. One table, 2 chairs, a narrow cot shoved against the wall, the stove's red belly glowing. "Place is small," Thaddeus muttered. Almira shook her head. "Small's all right. Small can keep you safe." Safe. The word landed like something he'd forgotten how to say. Outside, the snow thickened, piling soft against the glass in slow white waves. The ranch, so used to silence, now carried new heartbeats, new breathing. Thaddeus stood there, not sure what had just shifted, only that it had. Quiet and permanent. Almira Voss had walked in with winter still clinging to her hem. And somehow the cold didn't bite quite so hard anymore. They ate like folks who hadn't seen a hot plate in months. Slow, careful, spoons moving with reverence. Almira worked the little kitchen with sure hands, ladling thick stew, passing warmth back to the table like she'd stolen it from the fire itself and was giving it freely. The kids eyed her like young sprouts turning toward the first spring sun. Little Zephyr reached out just once, tiny fingers brushing the frayed edge of Almira's sleeve before snatching back, scared the warmth might vanish like mist. Thaddeus watched the children, but mostly he watched Almira, more closely than he'd studied anything these past 5 hard winters. She wasn't one for idle talk. Every word came only when called for. She spent words the way a frontiersman rations ammunition. Each one had to earn its place against the cold before it left her lips. After supper, once the young ones were tucked beneath a faded patchwork quilt Thaddeus hadn't unfolded in months, he and Almira sat across from each other. The stove crouched between them, its iron sides purring with heat like a living creature. Snowflakes tapped the window panes in steady, soft rhythms, making the cabin feel alive for the first time in years. "You been out east long?" Thaddeus asked, tossing the question into the quiet to fill it. Almira's fingers circled the rim of her tin cup, slow and thoughtful. "Near the river, mostly," she answered. "We followed the mill camps till my husband fell sick. Work dried up fast. Frozen timber don't need families, just men with axes." Thaddeus nodded. He knew that kind of loss. Out here it had its own sound. The slow scrape of boots leaving a porch for good, the deliberate push of a chair back under the table one last time. "What do you cook?" he asked, curiosity slipping past his guard. A small smile crossed her face then. Quick, private, flashing a glimpse of teeth and something softer underneath. "Same as my ma taught," she said. "Soup thick enough to put a man back on his feet, bread that holds butter like it means it, pies stuffed with molasses and raisins that keep their secrets close." Her voice stayed even, but a deeper hunger edged the words. Not for food, but for a place that might remember who you were. Thaddeus felt an old memory stir. Sophrona's hands guiding his over a mound of dough years ago. The warm, living smell of yeast that once convinced him small wonders were still possible. He cleared his throat. Then it settled. You start come morning. Winter wrapped itself around the words like a heavy wool shawl, sealing the bargain. That evening the wind rose again, restless, like some big animal shifting in its den. Thaddeus draped an extra blanket over the sleeping children and stayed until their breathing leveled out, faces eased by sleep. Almira lingered by the hearth longer, cradling a tin cup, hands soaking up the warmth as if she were memorizing how the firelight moved across the walls. Days settled into a rhythm quicker than Thaddeus ever expected. Almira's cooking filled empty corners, literal and otherwise. Golden-crusted loaves cooled on the stove shelf. Stew simmered low, filling the air with rich promise. Small habits wove themselves into daily life. The neat sweep of salt from the doorstep, the patient way she darned socks while telling the kids stories of little towns she'd passed through, the soft dawn humming that felt like storing songs against the long cold. Thaddeus started waking earlier just to catch the smell of fresh coffee and the stove's quiet hiss. The kitchen table was set without him asking. Children's laughter, soft, startled, slipped into rooms that once only echoed his own footsteps. But Winter keeps tallies in quiet ways, patient and slow. Not everybody in Mason Creek took kindly to the change. Gossip is a lean, hungry critter that prowls best after dark. By the second week, Alvis Boone from the co-op rode up, casual-like, but his eyes were doing the real talking. Cap brim crusted with frost. "You taking in strangers from back east?" he asked, voice flat as a hard-packed trail. "They were passing through," Thaddeus answered. "Needed work, needed a roof. I pay square." Alvis didn't push. He just let his gaze hang there, heavy, waiting for something to give. Then he turned his horse and rode off, leaving unspoken questions in the snow like tracks. A few days later, a note appeared, pinned to the same post where Thaddeus had hung his sign. Unsigned. One careful line in neat ink. "Watch who you let into town." The words were tidy, the warning cold. Almira read it, folded it steady, slipped it into her pocket like it was nothing more than a scrap of paper. That night, after the kids were asleep, she laid the note on the table between them and poured 2 cups of tea. Lamplight turned the steam silver. For the first time since she'd arrived, her face weighed the new warmth against something sharper. "You won't run off?" Thaddeus asked quietly, the words half question, half plea. Almira looked at him a long time, the hard lines in her face eased. "I won't run," she said. "Not with them here." Thaddeus held her gaze. Her promise settled into his chest like a smooth, certain river stone. He wanted to ask what they'd do if the town turned ugly, if hungry mouths started spitting venom instead of words. He wanted to know if she had bloodkin anywhere beyond this valley. He wanted to know what shadows she still carried hidden in the folds of her shawl. Instead, he asked the smaller thing, "Do you miss him?" It wasn't mean. Winter has a way of stripping folks down to honest. Almira's fingers tightened on her cup. "Every day," she said, "but missing ain't the same as quitting. I carry it. I don't let it tip the whole day over." No sermon, just plain truth, like naming the weather, real, unavoidable, something you plan around. So they kept on. 2 souls with pasts that smelled of smoke and hard rain, learning a new way to talk, learning how to live in a house that used to be nothing but a monument to being alone. Snow kept climbing that week. The children built rickety sleds from busted crate slats and dragged them down the gentle slope behind the barn. their shouts swallowed soft by the wind. Almira taught them to braid wool, fingers steady and kind. Laramie picked up the trick of stacking firewood so the pile would burn slow and steady through a pitch-black, starless night. But Granville Tate, who ran the general store and nursed every small grudge like a slow fire, stayed trouble. He was tight-lipped and friendly only to folks whose names he'd already scratched onto his credit ledger. Granville Tate rode past the ranch slow, his gaze scraping the fence line, hanging on the small mitten pinned to the clothes line to dry. The look lingered, thick as valley fog. "They're outsiders," he called across the road one raw afternoon, voice carrying just far enough for Thaddeus to hear. "Town's stretched thin already. We don't need extra mouths we ain't seen come green up time." Thaddeus kept his mouth shut. He'd long since learned not to throw fuel on icy words. But that night, when the wind choked the shutters and snow whipped the fields in wild white sheets, Thaddeus stood in the open doorway watching Almira tuck Zephyr under the quilt. A fierce, quiet protectiveness twisted tight in his chest. Not greedy, but bone-deep guardian. Winter had carved its mark on every soul in the valley, in the guarded stairs at the co-op, in the deep creases framing Granville's eyes, in the careful Sunday kindness folks offered like it cost them something. Almira's coming had shifted the balance here, slow and deep, like a quiet uprising inside the walls. Outside, the storm turned meaner, snow falling heavier, faster, impatient, wiping away tracks before they could settle. The whole world shrank to white and close, yet the ranch glowed warm from within, a steady lantern against the dark. Thaddeus shut the door, slid the latch home, dropped the heavy bolt. His hand stayed steady for 2 reasons now. The blizzard demanded it, and something new did too, something he couldn't name yet, but it felt more and more like finally belonging somewhere. The storm didn't let up by morning. It bore down harder, wind raking long, frozen talons over the roof, snow banking high against the windows until the outside world dissolved into one pale, endless hush. Thaddeus woke before first light, the house still wrapped in sleep. The quiet inside had changed, no longer the hollow echo that used to rattle his ribs. This was thicker, warmer, alive with held breath and small heartbeats woven into the seams. He padded into the main room, boots whispering on the boards. The stove still breathed a faint orange ember. Almira must have stirred in the dark hours. She always rose at least once to feed the fire, making sure the cold never crept close to the young ones. Thaddeus reached for the wood box, then froze. She was already there, sitting close to the stove, shawl pulled tight around her shoulders, braid half unraveled, hands folded calm in her lap. She wasn't stoking the flames. She was staring into them, eyes locked on the shifting light like she was weighing unspoken thoughts. She didn't flinch when he stepped nearer. "I heard the wind," she said soft. Thaddeus nodded, eased into the chair beside her, leaving a careful space between them. Warmth brushed both their knees. "Did you sleep at all?" he asked. "A little," she breathed out slow. "Storms rattle me. They remind a body how small we really are when the big things take hold." He studied the clean line of her cheek in the fireglow, the steady stillness she carried. "If there's anything you need," she gave a tired half-smile, "you've already done more than plenty." Quiet settled between them. Not uneasy, just patient, waiting its turn. A log snapped. The house groaned under fresh snow weight. Up in the loft, Laramie shifted once in his sleep. Almira's shoulders eased like she'd let go of a breath held too long. "Thaddeus," she whispered, voice almost lost under the wind's growl. "I don't aim to bring trouble down on you. Not from town. Not from whoever might be watching." He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "You ain't trouble. Folks'll jaw. Let 'em." His tone stayed low, rock solid. "What counts is those 3 kids got heat in a roof tonight. And so do you." Almira met his eyes then, direct, searching. She didn't say thank you. The look did it all. Before he could speak again, a heavy thud landed on the porch, deliberate, cutting sharp through the howl. Almira went rigid. Thaddeus was up in a heartbeat, instinct kicking hard. 3 long strides carried him across the room. He cracked the door, peered into the swirling white. A bundle rested neat against the rail. Not thrown, set careful. He stepped out. Wind slashed his face raw. He scooped it up. Something metal clinked inside. Snow hissed on the cloth. Back inside, Almira stood with hands flat to her chest, waiting. Thaddeus spread the bundle on the table. A tin of biscuits, 2 jars of preserves, a small rye loaf wrapped in clean cotton, and a folded note. Almira's breath shook. He opened it. The handwriting was neat, man's hand, familiar somehow. For the children? Storms too rough for hard feelings. Pass her well. Almira's lips parted. She swallowed rough, fingertips grazing the paper's edge. Thaddeus set it down gentle. "See? Not everybody's against you." But Almira didn't smile. Her eyes brimmed, raw gratitude tangled with disbelief, like kindness was a tongue she'd forgotten how to speak. The kids woke soon after, pulled by the scent of warming bread. Zephyr ran to Almira, arms high. Almira bent, scooped her up, pressed a kiss to the cold little cheek. For a heartbeat, the blizzard outside might as well have been on another planet. Later, as Thaddeus shrugged into his coat to brace a fence beam the wind had cracked, Almira reached out, fingertips light on his sleeve. "Be careful out there," she said. It was the first time her voice carried the fear of losing someone. Outside, the gale shoved him sideways. Snow stung like needles. He worked quick, breath exploding in white bursts. The ranch felt smaller under that heavy sky, horizon swallowed whole by the storm. As he drove the last nail into the new brace, a shadow stirred at the far edge of the property. As Thaddeus drove the last nail home, a shadow flickered at the property's far edge, dark against the rolling white drifts. A rider sat motionless on horseback. Thaddeus straightened slow, hand easing toward the Winchester propped against the fence post. The man didn't ride closer, didn't hail, didn't wheel away. He simply watched, features buried under a frost-loaded hat brim. Then, deliberate as he'd come, he nudged the horse and melted back into the swirling white, swallowed whole. Thaddeus's heart hammered loud in his ears. A fresh chill crawled under his skin. Not the winter kind, but the slow burn of something coming. When he stomped back inside, shaking snow in heavy clumps from his coat, Almira caught the look in his eyes and froze. "What is it?" she whispered. Thaddeus latched the door solid. "Somebody was out there." Her face drained pale. "From town?" "Don't know. Didn't look local." The silence thickened fast. Almira drew her shawl closer. "Thaddeus," she said, voice low, "we didn't bring secrets here. But trouble has a way of trailing folks even when they've done nothing to earn it." He stepped nearer, dropping his tone. "Whatever's trailing, it'll have to come through me first." She held his gaze, unflinching. Then she nodded once, slow, like sealing a vow she hadn't asked for but badly needed. Outside, the gale kept roaring. Inside, the house clung to its heat, fiercer than ever. Somewhere between the howl and the hush, the warning had landed plain. Winter never sends strangers without purpose. By dusk, the storm quieted to a low, simmering rage. The wind no longer tore, just murmured along the eaves like a half-remembered threat. Thaddeus kept pacing to the windows, though frost turned the outside world to one trembling white veil. Almira moved through the kitchen with deliberate calm, but her glance kept darting to the door, to the gathering dark. The children felt it too. Laramie sat by the hearth carving a chunk of pine, but his knife moved too careful, too slow for a boy his age. Zephyr clutched her rag doll tight in both hands, guarding it from a danger that hadn't crossed the threshold yet, but already pressed against the walls. At last, Almira set her wooden spoon aside. "Thaddeus," she said quiet. "Whoever that rider was, you reckon he'll come back?" Thaddeus never coated truth in sugar, not even when it carried a colder bite than the weather. "Men don't ride through blizzards for nothing," he answered. He had his reasons. Almira pressed her palms together till the knuckles showed white. "If it's somebody from our old life." "Doesn't matter who's past," Thaddeus cut in before she could spiral. "He won't get past this family, not now, not while you're under my roof." The iron in his voice startled her, solid, unyielding, close to a sworn promise. Supper passed in near silence, too quiet. Every small noise stood out sharp. Spoons clinking bowls, wind brushing glass, the soft pop of embers settling. Thaddeus sat with his back square to the door, body wound tight, no effort to hide the readiness. Almira watched him once, just long enough for their eyes to lock and soften. After the children were finally bedded down, Thaddeus moved to check the latch again. As he reached for the door, Almira stepped close. "Thaddeus," she whispered, "you're shaking." He hadn't noticed. Winter seeped into a man uninvited. Fear sometimes did the same. Almira hesitated, then took his hands. Rough palms met rough palms. The warmth between them was small, but it held. "You're not alone anymore," she said. Simple words. In winter, simple things often carried the most weight. He didn't speak, just nodded, holding her hands a beat longer than needed. Much later, after Almira had turned in, and the children's breathing rose and fell like a gentle tide through the house, Thaddeus sat vigil at the table. Lamp turned low, rifle across his lap, fire murmuring behind him. Then, a sound, soft, muffled, wrong, snow crunching under careful boots. Thaddeus rose without a creak, heart dropping into a slow, dangerous rhythm. He crossed to the window, thumbed a clear circle in the frost, leaned in. A tall figure stood near the barn, not the mounted man from earlier. This one walked. Heavy coat, face shadowed under a wide brim. He raised a lantern. Yellow light cut through the falling snow like a lone star. Thaddeus cracked the door. Cold poured in. "Who's there?" he called, voice low but carrying. The figure stepped nearer, halting just beyond the porch glow. Snow drifted between them like slow curtains. "You Thaddeus Flint?" the man asked. Thaddeus stiffened. "Who's asking?" The stranger let out a breath that fogged the air. He lowered the lantern a fraction, showing eyes that wore the cold too easy. "I'm looking for a woman named Almira Voss," he said, "and her 3 young ones." The wind fell dead. The world squeezed tight. Thaddeus's hand slid toward the rifle, leaning by the wall. "And why?" he said, voice hard as struck flint. "Would you come hunting them in a storm like this?" The man didn't blink, didn't smile. "Because," he answered quiet, "her husband sent me." Behind Thaddeus, the house seemed to stop breathing. Almira's footsteps halted somewhere down the hall. The children stirred faintly in sleep. The fire shrank to one glowing coal. Winter had finally delivered its reason. Thaddeus held his breath at first. The words hung there like a match struck in dry grass. Almira's husband. gone 6 months by her own trembling word, by the weight she carried every time his name thinned her voice. Thaddeus stepped fully onto the porch, pulling the door shut behind so the young ones wouldn't catch fragments on the wind. "She told me her husband passed," he said, jaw locked. The stranger's gaze flicked once, almost pitying, past the law, past the bottle maybe. "Passed from this world? No, sir, not yet." The cold hit Thaddeus deeper. "State your name," he said. The man let the lantern drop lower. The lantern dipped lower in the stranger's grip. Snowflakes hissed against his coat, popped on the hot metal frame. "Bess Rollins," he said. "I'm her husband's brother." A long beat hung between them. Thaddeus had never laid eyes on the man before, but everything about him, the clamped jaw, the sunken cheeks, the wary set of his shoulders, felt hewn from the same hard country that had shaped Almira. Lean hunger, endless winters, trails that broke more folks than they delivered. "What do you want with her?" Thaddeus asked, voice flat. The lantern caught Bass's exhaled breath in a pale cloud. "What kin wants. Our blood back home. My brother's still breathing, but he's torn up inside. After she took off, he near lost his mind hunting for the kids." Another pause. Snow settled heavy on Thaddeus's shoulders like silent verdict. "They belong with family," Bass added. Softer now, heavier. Thaddeus stayed quiet. Bass pressed on. "We didn't run her off, Flint. She bolted, after a bad row, after he laid hands on her." His throat worked hard. "I ain't defending what he did. Grief, whiskey, winter, they ate him alive, but he never wanted them gone for good. He's been searching ever since." Behind Thaddeus, the door eased open a crack. "Bass!" Almira's voice came thin, barely holding steady. Thaddeus turned. She stood framed in the doorway, shawl clutched tight, hair spilling loose around her face. Her eyes darkened, not with fear of the man himself, but of the old ghosts he hauled in his wake like dragging sleet. Bass let the lantern fall all the way, showing deep lines of weariness carved into his face. "Almira," he breathed. "Thank the Lord. I figured you'd frozen somewhere out here." She stepped onto the porch slow, testing each board like it might crack. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. "Somebody had to." Bass looked at her, not angry, just worn thin by duty. "He ain't right, Almira. Needs help. And those kids need real kin, not handouts from strangers." The words stung Thaddeus, sharp and unfair. Almira flinched like she'd taken a slap, then lifted her chin, trembling but steady. "Family doesn't hurt, Bass," she said quiet. "Family doesn't punch holes in walls and lay the blame on the nearest woman when the crops freeze under snow. Family doesn't leave marks that need explaining to little ones." Her hands shook. "Your brother lost himself long before I left. I ran because staying would have killed us all." Bass swallowed rough. "He's different now," he said. "Sober, praying, steady. He knows what he done wrong. I know it too." Almira whispered, "I know." Snow floated between them in soft, deceptive veils. Bass finally met Thaddeus's eyes. "You can't hold her here. Folks are already talking. If the law catches wind she walked out on her husband." Thaddeus stepped up. "She's safe under this roof," he said, low and level. "Storm or no storm, law or no law." Bass studied him then, really looked, took in the rifle by the door, the warm light spilling from the cabin, the quiet steel in Thaddeus's stance. Then he turned back to Almira. "You aim to stay?" She looked down, then up again. Slow, pained, but sure. The certainty ran through Thaddeus like the floorboards steadying underfoot. "I aim to raise my children where winter don't have fists," she said. "I aim to build something that don't leave bruises." Bass's breath shuddered out. He nodded once, just once, shoulders dropping like a weight had finally lifted. "I'll tell him you're alive," he murmured. "And safe." A pause. "He'll want to come, Almira, but I'll do what I can to hold him back." Almira closed her eyes. "Thank you." Bass stepped back into the whiteout. "I won't bother you again," he told Thaddeus. "Look after them." Thaddeus gave a short nod. Something fierce and silent rose hard behind his ribs. When Bass vanished into the storm, Almira stood trembling, not from cold, but from a hard truth finally dragged into the open. Thaddeus reached for her hand. She didn't pull back. Inside, the house still held its heat, its light, the tender first threads of something stronger than the blizzard. For the first time, winter felt like it might crack before it cracked them. "Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for giving your time to this story. Some journeys shape us, and we hope this one left a mark on your heart. There are more paths ahead, more legends of love, hardship, and redemption beneath the western sky. Please subscribe, leave your thoughts, and travel with us once again. Thank you, and God bless." Aviso legal/disclaimer. The stories presented here are creative expressions and may mix historical inspiration with dramatized scenes. AI tools contribute to some elements of voice, imagery, and structure, but every published story is refined by editors and creators to ensure authentic emotional impact. We honor YouTube's policies and do not generate deceptive likenesses or artificial depictions of real people. All audiovisual components are legally licensed. Any use, redistribution, or alteration of this content must be granted through written consent. Your presence here means a lot. Thank you for supporting artistic storytelling.